So we are starting topic 8 today, which is all about quadratic functions. All right. The topic we just finished, factoring, I did grade your, well, not this class's test, but I graded like 3.5 classes so far. Headphone out. Guys, definitely no headphones during lecture. I know that I've like kind of been more relaxed about it, but if it's during lecture, it's honestly just gonna annoy me because some people don't have the grades to be listening to music while I'm talking. All right, so just don't do it. All right, your attention for sure. All right, but as I was saying, quadratic functions is what we're going to be focusing on this unit. If you didn't fully understand the last unit, well, guess what? You're going to see it again next year and the year after that, and in college. So if you didn't understand it the first time, like I can understand this might have been the first time that you're seeing it, but you're just going to keep seeing it again and again. And I can tell you when I was grading the test, it was definitely like some class periods just did better than others. And I really don't know how people can like sit through a math class and like nothing sticks. All right, there were some tests where I was just like, what in the world were they doing? Like what pattern were they following? Because I just don't know. I do find ways to let you use your notes, like even on that colored paper, you can write whatever notes you want on there. And still, like, I did have some weird tests where I was just like, what are these kids doing during lecture? All right, math is just following steps. The calculations part, you don't even need to be good at because you get to use a calculator. So really just pay attention to the process. I'm not even making you memorize a whole ton of it. All right, because I find ways to let you use notes even on the reading. So just keep that in mind for this one. This unit also tends to be a little more difficult, but it is also one of those units that you'll see again next year, the year after that, and in college. All right, we spent a ton of time on quadratic functions. So today you'll learn how to write them in standard form, that the graph of quadratic functions is called a parabola. You'll learn how to calculate axis of symmetry and vertex, and to tell me if that vertex is a maximum or minimum. So lots of stuff today, but it's just an introduction to quadratic functions. The lesson today I am recording, but of course I have a bunch of links down here if you care to see them. I can tell you I do have a kid in one of my other class periods that has been on an extended absence, and he's already turned in the assignment for this lesson already without me even recording the lecture yet, because I usually will link the lesson that I gave last year, which I use the same materials. All right, so just no excuses. A lot of people tell me when I check their binder, like, oh, I was absent that day. All right, that means nothing to me. All right, it's all in Schoology. If you want to get a good grade, you need to go into Schoology and learn it. All right, there's really no way around it. So there's that. The practice is evens or odds. So you should have like about 15 minutes to work on it today. We'll start class tomorrow going over the answers and then doing the exit ticket. So it's actually more of an entrance ticket, I guess, tomorrow, and then we'll take the exit ticket for the other lesson on Friday. So questions about anything? All right, so now onto the notes. So you should have this paper in front of you. So standard form of quadratic functions. Is going to be y equals ax squared plus bx plus c. Y equals ax squared plus bx plus c. And that should look familiar, doesn't it? Yes. And the word quadratic should be a little familiar too, like when we did polynomials, where we classify them by like degree and number of terms. All right, if it was a second degree, it was classified as quadratic. So anything where like the highest exponent is x squared, that is a quadratic equation. So even if it's just this, that's still a quadratic equation. All right, when graphed, a quadratic equation creates a U-shaped curve called a parabola. All right, the graph is called a parabola. So that x squared causes the graph to either look like this or like this. So it's a U-shaped graph called a parabola. All right. There's different types of parabolas. We call them positive and negative. You can tell if it's going to be positive or negative based on the x squared. All right. But first, we're going to use the graphing calculator to sketch both of these. So our graphing calculator that we use is Desmos, because that's the same one that you'll use on the Aspire test, which we'll talk more about a different day. All right, if you plan to take the SAT, ACT, then you might need like a real graphing calculator. All right, but we can just use Desmos because that's what we'll be using on this year's standardized test anyway. And to use Desmos, all you're doing is just typing in the equation how you see it. All right, so here's like the x squared, but then add the other stuff, the plus 2x minus 5. And we're going to sketch this graph onto here. So you see that like the vertex of it is in the third quadrant, so we'll just make sure to put it here when we sketch it. And we see that it opens upward. All right, so bottom of it, the vertex would be like here. And we're just sketching it. Should be a U shape, so try to make it U shaped. And it's just a rough sketch. All right, and then do the same thing with the other equation. All right, if you don't have Desmos out already, I'd probably get it out because you'll need it anyway. All right, and then you should be practicing entering this stuff. So negative x squared plus 3x plus x. All right, look, we get a U-shaped graph. Vertex is in the first quadrant now. So just transfer this drawing onto here. So just a rough sketch. Right, so vertex in the first quadrant is U-shaped, and this one opens downward. All right, but again, before even sketching it, I know this one opens upward because it's positive x squared, and I know this one opens downward because it's negative x squared. All right, so let's fill in these blanks. If A, which is the number that's in front of the x squared, just like when we did the factory, if A is positive, then the parabola opens what direction? Upward. You just say up, but I like saying upward. Like a smile. All right, so when positive things happen, they make you smile. So that parabola is positive. If A is negative, so the number in front of the x squared is negative, the parabola opens downward or just down, whatever. It opens down like a frown. All right, it rhymes. Down like a frown. So when negative things happen, they make you frown. That's why when this is negative, it opens down like a frown. So questions on the vocab so far? That should be easy points. Identifying whether it's positive or negative. All right, couple more vocab words. So we have axis of symmetry. That is going to be the vertical line that divides the parabola into two equal parts. The vertical line that divides the parabola into two equal parts. All right, the vertical line that divides the parabola into two equal parts. So like when we say that something is symmetrical, what are we really saying about it? Here's some mumbling, I'm sure you guys know on some level, right? So if I say like, is a rectangle symmetrical, would you say it's symmetrical or not? Yes. Yes, I can draw a line down a rectangle this way, and it's the same on both sides. I mean, my rectangle isn't perfect, but like most rectangles are, right? What about a heart? Pretend like it's symmetrical. If I draw a line down the middle of it, is it the same on both sides? Yes. Yes. So symmetrical, it's kind of like looking in a mirror, right? They're the same, but there might be like in a different orientation. So if you can draw a line down the middle, then it's symmetrical. So parabolas are symmetrical, whether it opens upward or downward. The axis of symmetry is the actual line that's going down the middle. All right. And the reason why I brought up like a heart or like a rectangle is because I did see it on the practice Aspire test that they sent out. All right, we'll talk about that another day. But it does reflect back to things that you should already know, like if things are symmetrical or like nets of like cubes, right? So just random stuff from previous years. All right, so parabolas, they're symmetrical. The axis of symmetry is the line that divides it into the two equal parts. Everyone with me so far? All right, the formula for axis of symmetry is x equals negative b over 2a. All right, and the a and b, just like when we did the diamond method and stuff, comes from the given equation. So we can find the axis of symmetry by plugging in b and a. We'll do some examples of that later. I'm still debating on whether or not I'll give this to you on a test. I feel like no, because I let you use your notes, but we'll see when it gets to that time. All right, next vocab word is the vertex. So that will be the turning point of the parabola. All right, the turning point of the parabola. So it could be the lowest point, like on this picture, or it could be the highest point, like on that picture. All right, if it's the lowest point, it's called a minimum. What's the opposite of minimum? So if it's the highest point of the graph, then it's the maximum. So an easy point on the test would be identifying whether it's a maximum or minimum. So a good test question could be what's true about this quadratic equation. And it might be the vertex is a minimum or whatever it is. All right. So questions on any of the vocab? All right, then let's do an example. For each of these problems and for the problems on your practice, you're gonna solve for axis of symmetry, vertex, and then you're just gonna do a rough sketch. We'll learn how to like really graph it tomorrow. All right, but just a rough sketch today. So first thing, look at your given quadratic equation. It'd probably be a good strategy to just label what A, B, and C are. So what's A in this quadratic equation? So x squared goes right after the A. What number is in front of the x squared? What's the number if it's not written? 1. What's B in this example? 8. What's C? 15. And I know we're not using C yet, but we might as well just, because we'll use it another day. All right, so first know what A, B, and C are. Next, use your axis of symmetry equation. So x equals negative b over 2a, write it every time so that you remember it. And then anytime you plug stuff in, use parentheses. So like negative, parentheses, 8 over 2, parentheses, what a was, which we said is 1. All right, now you can solve this by hand, but I also think you should just check your work with a calculator because sometimes you guys make silly mistakes. All right, so plug it in, always use parentheses. And if you're getting anything other than -4, let me know. Maybe you forgot a negative, or maybe you put a parenthesis like a weird way. I don't know. But if you solved it by hand, you would also hit -4, as long as you do the order operations. So x equals -4. That's my axis of symmetry. Questions about that part? All right, and just like, I don't know if you remember when we did exponential functions and asymptotes and all that, but your axis of symmetry is the equation of a line. So you need to have the x equals in there. Equations have equal signs. All right, now the vertex. The vertex is the turning point of the parabola, right? It's a coordinate written in XY form. Now, look at the equation. We have x's and y's in the equation. So just like when we did exponential functions or linear functions, if I have the x value, how can I find the y value? Good. Substitute the -4 for the x. We just found out what x equals. So if I plug it into my given equation, again, when you plug stuff in, use parentheses. So I get y equals -4 in parentheses squared plus 8 times -4 in parentheses plus 15. Then I can find my y value of my vertex. All right, I know the x of my vertex is -4, because that's what my x is from the axis of symmetry. Y we solve for. And I can do it by hand, but you guys sometimes make little mistakes, so I suggest just throwing it in your calculator and making your life easier. So -4 squared in parentheses. So look at the screen right now. You have to put it in parentheses because look what happens when I take the parentheses away. It tells me that it's a -16. Is -4 squared -16? No. A negative times a negative gives me a positive, but the calculator reads it wrong. It reads exponents first and then multiplying by -1. All right, so the calculator isn't that smart. So that's why you have to put the parentheses and then plug in everything else. Let it do the order of operations for you. And if you're getting anything other than -1, let me know. All right, but y equals -1. So that's the y value of my vertex. Again, I could always do it by hand, but sometimes you guys make silly mistakes. So I'm fine with you using a calculator. Just know that when it comes to work that I want to see on your practice, I'll highlight it in blue. I want to see this part. And I want to see at a minimum this part. All right, I want to see that you know that you plug it in to find the y. All right, but the rest of it, you can use your calculator to plug in. So questions on that? All right, I'll show you another way to find the vertex by using Desmos, which I know you'll probably like a lot better, but still, I want to see this on your practice so that you get the full points for the workshop. All right, now lastly, we're just going to sketch it. So before I even sketch it or type it into my calculator and see what it looks like, how do I know if it opens upward or downward? The sign on the A or on the x squared. Is it positive or negative? So does it open upward or downward? Good. So then for the sketch, we're just doing rough sketches. We know it opens upward. All right. So where would the axis of symmetry be on this picture? At -4, yes, that is true. You could also just say right down the middle is the answer I was looking for. All right, but sketch your axis of symmetry right down the middle and label it. So x equals -4. Where would the vertex be on this picture? It would be in the middle as well. And since it's a positive parabola, it'd be at the lowest point. So where the parabola starts to turn. So put the dot for the vertex and label it. And that's what will satisfy the sketch part for your practice. So questions about that? All right, I'm gonna have you guys try number 3 on the back. That will be the All right, so number 3 was the one I wanted you to look at so that you can do an example that also is a positive parabola. So axis of symmetry is the first thing that it asks you to identify. So what's the formula for axis of symmetry? -b/2a. So x equals -b/2a. For that, you need to be able to identify A and B. And we might as well just identify C, even though we're not using it in this lesson. So what's A in this equation? What's B in this equation? Good, don't forget that sign. If you just put 12, fix it. So -12, and then C is 5. Plug it in, remember to use parentheses, because you should see that it's a -12 over 2 times A, which is 3. All right, so that's what you should have so far. Highly recommend you use Desmos for this part, but if you also calculate it by hand, assuming you do it correctly, you should get the same answer. What happens when you have a double negative? Becomes a positive. It's like -1 times -12. +12. What's 2 times 3? And then what's 12 divided by 6? 2. So you should have had that your axis of symmetry is x equals 2. And you do need to have that x equals. All right, vertex now. Should be a coordinate. What do you guys get? 2, -7 is correct. All right, the 2 we get from axis of symmetry, right? We know x equals 2. The y we get from doing what? Good, substitute the 2 in for the x into your given equation. So y equals 3 times 2 squared minus 12 times 2 plus 5. I do want to see that on your homework. I want to know that you know how to plug stuff in. All right. Whether you do the calculation by hand or just make your life easy and use Desmos, I'll leave up to you. So if you plugged it in, it should look exactly how it looks on your paper, except for maybe the y equals. And if you get anything other than -7, see how I entered it. Right, you need parentheses in the right spots and negatives in the right spots. Questions about that? All right. So -7. Lastly, we're going to sketch it. I'll squeeze it down here. What way does it open, upward or downward? Upward is correct. Where would the axis of symmetry be? Down the middle is the answer I'm looking for. Make sure you label it x equals 2. And where would the vertex be?
The axis of symmetry.
Where the axis of symmetry meets the line is a good way to describe it. In this one, it's the lowest point of the graph. So would it be a maximum or a minimum? Minimum. And I do want you to label the coordinate also. So questions on 3. All right, and then I forgot to record myself going over number 1 in Desmos, so I'll just go over 3 in Desmos. All right, you can verify your answers by typing in the equation. Oops, I messed up. Hold on. By typing in the equation that was given to you, you see that it does open upward. The vertex is at 2, -7, so just hover over it. And if I type in the axis of symmetry, x equals 2, it is a line that goes down the center of the graph. All right, so axis of symmetry is a line, you need the x equals. Questions about that? All right, so let's do an example of where it opens downward. So let's look at 5 together. And we'll kind of go a little bit faster now too, since it's the same process each time. All right, so axis of symmetry, draw or write down the formula each time. X equals -b over 2a. What is my a in this equation? -1 is correct. What's b? And what's c? -2. So plug it into your formula. I get -4, which we'll simplify in the next step, over 2 times -1. -4 becomes +4. 2 times -1 is -2. What's 4 divided by -2? Okay, so there's the axis of symmetry. The vertex is a coordinate xy. We should know what the x is immediately now. What is it? -2, and then we need to solve for the y. How do we solve for the y?
Substitute that. X.
Good. Substitute -2 for the x in the given equation. So make sure you have this in your practice too, because I will look for that when I give points. So I get -2 squared minus 4 times -2 minus 2. So anytime you plug stuff in, use parentheses. All right, what do we get from entering it into Desmos? Let's see. I got +2. Is that what you guys got? All right, good. If you're getting something other than that, do speak up. All right, lastly, sketch it. Would it open upward or downward? Downward. The x squared is negative. A is negative, so it opens downward. Where would the axis of symmetry be? Right down the middle. Make sure you sketch a line right down the middle and label it. X equals -2. And where would the vertex be? And this one, it's the highest point of your graph. So label it, put a dot there. -2, -2, +2. And maximum or minimum? A maximum. Questions on number 5? All right, I'll save the you try for when you get to your practice. Let's look at some of these like harder ones, I guess you could say. So let's look at 7. Or actually, let's look at 8. All right, so any questions on 5? All right, so let's look at 8. Is this still a quadratic equation? Yes, because it has an x squared. That's what makes it a quadratic equation. It has an x squared and there's no higher exponents. But it is missing, something, but that's all right. You can still identify these parts of it. Just this time, what will A be? What will B be? And what will C be? -3. All right, so that's how we label it. I know we don't use C, but let's just, for the sake of identifying. All right, since the B term isn't there at all, there's no number in front of an X because there's no X at all, then B is 0. Questions about that? All right, now when we plug it into our formula, it's just that B is now going to be 0. So I have -0 over 2 times A, which is 1. Can I really have a -0? No, what's -1 times 0? And then what's 2 times 1? And then what's 0 divided by 2? 0. And if you're not sure, put in your calculator. 0 divided by 2 is 0. All right. Questions about that process? The axis of symmetry is x equals 0. Now the vertex. How do I find my vertex? Plug in x, which is 0 after we solve for it. We can put the 0 in the x spot since we already know what that is. We just need to solve for y in the trash. All right. So plug it into your given equation. Y equals 0 squared minus 3. So plugging it in for x and solving for y. We can use a calculator, but I don't think we really need to. What's 0 squared? And then what's 0 minus 3? Good. Feel free to use a calculator if you want. That's our vertex. Questions about 8? All right, then sketch it. I could use my graphing calculator to help me sketch it, but even without it, I should know that it opens in what direction? Upward, because A is positive. When A is positive, it opens up like a smile. Where would my axis of symmetry be? Down the middle. Label it, x equals 0. And where would my vertex be? 0, -3, or otherwise known as the highest or lowest point of your graph. In this one, it's the lowest point of my graph. All right, and so label it. Questions on this process? All right, and if it were me, I would verify my answers on Desmos. You guys try number 9. I'll project the answer and I will give you 2 minutes. But if you finish it early, start working on your practice, because that's what we'll be doing for the rest of the class. But do try number 9. So here's number 9. This person did not write the formula, but I suggest you guys do it each time because it'll help you remember it. I don't think in the past that I have given them this formula. So just write it down every time and then plug it in. All right, but you should have identified A as -2, B as 0, and C as 8. All right, so -B, -0 over 2 times A, -2. We get 0 divided by 4, which is 0. Or 0 divided by -4, which is 0. All right, so that gives you axis of symmetry. Make sure you have the x equals in there. And it gives you the x value of your vertex. All right, so just to find the y value of your vertex, plug in 0 for x in your given equation and solve for y. So 0 squared is 0. 0 times -2 is 0. 0 plus 8 is 8. So questions on that process? All right, and then your sketch should have your parabola opening downwards since A is negative. Have your vertex labeled, have your axis of symmetry labeled, and that's all I'm looking for from you guys today. So questions? All right, so that gives you like 11 minutes to work on your practice still. The key is on the back wall, just evens or odds, and make sure you have appropriate work shots.